All right, so we're tracking along with St. Paul in his letter to the Romans, and I'm going to deal mainly with the top part, the first part that I read. But first, there's this long line of kind of vituperation. There is no one who is righteous, not even one. All have turned aside. There is together they have become worthless. Their throats are open grave, etc., etc. And what Paul does there is he's talking about how. Where he basically, submits what's called a pearl string of Bible verses in which the scriptures themselves testify to Israel's faithlessness over the Old Testament narrative. Right? He said, basically Paul's saying our own story tells us that when we try to be faithful to God on our own terms, we wind up disobeying God. That when we try to live life without God, we wind up in rebellion, and again, disaster usually strikes. Catastrophe follows. And so he's basically reminding by, citing verses throughout the Old Testament that, listen, our rebellion against God and our moral bankruptcy when we try to live lives of godlessness is well documented by our own scriptures, by our own word. So therefore, what does our hope lay? How are we, in how are we called to be the people of God? What empowers us to be faithful to God? And basically, Paul is saying it's actually the same thing for us, the Jews, as it is for the Gentiles who now know Jesus Messiah and are baptized into him. It's always been the Spirit of God. It's always been God's gift to his people to be faithful. And that when his people are unfaithful, as they always are, God's own faithfulness is going to overcome our faithlessness. Especially, and Paul's going to be building up to show how God's faithfulness in Jesus, fulfilling God's call for loving obedience, is the preeminent sign and fact of God's faithfulness to us who are unfaithful, so that all people, Jew and Gentile alike, come needing the Holy Spirit that Jesus's loving obedience on the cross pours out on us in God's forgiveness and love and death to life power, that we all need the Holy Spirit to make us into God's people. And that's what this whole thing about circumcision and, one is circumcision, your circumcision is uncircumcision, and their uncircumcision is actually a circumcision. What is he talking about there? Circumcision is basically, it's a shorthand for being a part of God's people. And in a sense, the Holy Spirit, Paul's radical vision, his radical proclamation is that the Holy Spirit of God is creating a new ethnicity, a new people, a people who are willing to live a Messiah-shaped life, to live a life shaped by Jesus's life, to live shaped by Jesus's forgiveness on the cross, to a people who give themselves to one another and for the life of the world. And that gift of the Holy Spirit is what makes someone a part of God's people. That's the only thing that matters. Nothing external, nothing physical. Now we have to understand, it's physical versus spiritual doesn't mean it's all in my head. I'm a nice person in my head, or I have happy thoughts in my heart, and therefore God approves of me. That's not anywhere in Paul's mind. For Paul, that which is spiritual is actually more real than that which is physical. Why? Because physical stuff corrupts, decays, and dies and turns to dust. The spiritual, because it is from God and of God, is eternal. So the spiritual is actually more powerful, more present, more real, again, than physical stuff. And so our spiritual lives are actually lives that are eternal, that God's Spirit makes us spiritual people, not like, oh, I'm spiritual. I have, very elevated thoughts. No, to be spiritual means that we live lives that are leaning into the life of the resurrection. We live lives that testify to the victory of God's love. We live lives that participate in the new creation that God is starting in this very moment within each and every one of us and in our community as a whole. That's what being spiritual means as far as Paul's concerned, if you're interested in what St. Paul thinks about that. I personally am. I hope you are as well. So that's the letter to the Romans so far. We'll tune back in on Monday and take it up again. Let us say together a reading from Romans. Circumcision is indeed of value if you obey the law, but if you break the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. So, if those who are uncircumcised keep the requirements of the law, will not their uncircumcision be regarded as circumcision? Then those who are physically circumcised but keep the law will condemn you that have the written code and circumcision but break the law. For a person is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is true circumcision something external and physical. Rather, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and real circumcision is a matter of the heart. It is spiritual and not literal. Such a person receives praise not from others, but from God. Then what advantage has the Jew? Or what is the value of circumcision? Much in every way. For in the first place, the Jews were entrusted with the oracles of God. What if some were unfaithful? Will their faithlessness nullify the faithfulness of God? By no means. Although everyone is a liar, let God be proved true, as it is written, so that you may be justified in your words and prevail in your judging. But if our injustice serves to confirm the justice of God, what should we say? That God is unjust to inflict wrath on us? I speak in a human way. By no means. For then how could God judge the world? But if through my falsehood God's truthfulness abounds to his glory, why am I still being condemned as a sinner? And why not say, as some people slander us by saying that we say, let us do evil so that good may come? Their condemnation is deserved. What then? Are we any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under the power of sin. As it is written, there is no one who is righteous, not even one. There is no one who has understanding. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. There is no one who shows kindness. There is not even one. Their throats are open graves. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of vipers is under their lips. Their mouths are full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Ruin and misery are in their paths, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.